Hello, and welcome to the Maine Question podcast, our first of the year for 2024 as we continue with Season 9. I'm your host, Ron Lisnet. Now, it's been a minute since our last episode, but we are certainly happy to be back. In this episode, we take a dive into the world of research in all its forms. Now, before you go switching to something else, this isn't going to be a heavy, sciencey, techie episode. We want to look at the big picture. How do you learn to do research? What does doing research do for the person that's doing it? What does it do for the community, the state, the world at large? What does it mean for our quality of life, for the economy, and future prosperity? And what role does UMaine play in all of this for the state and beyond? Lots of questions to explore. That is our subject today with our guest joining us from across campus. Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're able to join us. Maybe let's start with a round of introductions. So maybe Caitlin, if you could start and just introduce yourself and what discipline you are involved with.
Absolutely. I'm Caitlin Howell. I'm a faculty member in biomedical engineering, and I'm also the associate director of the Center for Undergraduate Research here at UMaine.
Amelia?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amelia Couture-Biu. I'm an assistant professor in our media studies department within our communication, media, and journalism program, and I'm also part of the advisory committee for Cougar.
All right.
I'm Liza White. I'm a third-year PhD student majoring in biomedical engineering in Dr. Caitlin Howell's lab.
Great.
I'm Madeline Howarth, and I'm a junior and undergraduate student, and I'm double majoring in political science and international affairs.
Wow, that's great. You know, this topic of research or R&D cuts such a wide swath. I looked up the definition just in the dictionary just to amuse myself, and it's defined as the systematic investigation into the study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Okay, fair enough. We know that's the case. But then when you look at how research is sort of defined and talked about here at the university, it's so much more than that. There are some pretty lofty goals involved with this. Everything from sort of changing our economy to be an innovation, information, research-based economy, preparing the future workforce, which certainly pertains to you guys, and then a pretty lofty one, making Maine the best place to live and work in the country. What are your thoughts on sort of what research is, and then sort of the implications of what it can do? Anybody wants to chime in? Caitlin, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we really have good luck to be here in a university setting, because a university is really a special place where we have a perfect combination of young minds and experience and resources to really be able to tackle the big questions that are important for people all around the world. And I really feel that research gets to the heart of that, being able to identify what are the problems, and then being able to say, we can do something about this. All right, let's go. Let's get information. Let's outline what's happening. Let's come up with new solutions. Let's understand and let's create. And I think it's something really special that we have here. I feel lucky to be a part of it.
Right. Amelia, before we get into the specifics a little bit, maybe you could sort of paint the big picture research here at a land grant, sea grant, space grant institution. What does it look like here?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that our students often don't find out about unless they're doing something like Cougar is that the faculty members are doing research. So here as a land sea grant institution, 50% of my appointment is actually for research projects. So I'm teaching, but I'm also doing research and trying to answer some of these big and small societal questions. And one of the really cool things about UMaine and it being a public institution is also that it's all about giving back to the community. So figuring out how your research connects to real people with real issues and making sure that there's some communication of that as well. But I think I know we'll talk about Cougar a lot, but sometimes our students don't realize how much access and how much opportunity there is to participate in research until they start asking questions and get further along in their degree.
We'll get into the acronyms. We love acronyms around here. Cougar, there's the symposium, the research symposium to talk about, and the fact that UMaine is an R1 institution. I know that's a big point of pride that Maine has reached that pretty exclusive club. Any thoughts about what that means? Does that mean anything to you guys as a student?
It does to me, actually, and I'm a little bit biased because my mom's worked for this university for a little while, but I've traveled and moved a lot in my life, so UMO is one of the places that really stood out to me. I didn't want to go in-state originally, but what stood out to me was the R1 classification, which basically means, like, as I understand it, it's a classification by the Carnegie Foundation, so it means that we have over $50 million in research expenditures and grant over 70 research doctorates, which is very impressive. It's a little bit difficult to get an idea for, like, what that means if you're not familiar with that in academia, but it's pretty cool, basically. And that can mean different things practically depending on your level of education, but on an undergraduate level, from my understanding of it, it's a great opportunity for me as an undergraduate student, but also it gets more influential the higher up you go in academia.
Right. Liza, I know you're in grad school now. Just talk about your research experience and your project. What was the process like to learn how to do research? I mean, before you can figure out a question you want to go after, you got to learn the process of it. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I started my research starting my second year of my undergraduate. I actually came here for my undergraduate and then I continued on. So I really got exposure to research quite early, and that was just due to faculty in the biomedical engineering department doing a great job of promoting what research was available within our department. But I would say that because of COVID, I didn't really fully understand what you can do with research until I started in my graduate studies, and now just learning how to now teach undergraduates the process of research is really cool.
Yeah. What were the challenges and the bright spots? And maybe if you could both give us what's the cocktail napkin pitch for what your research is about, if you had to boil it down to one sentence. Madeline, what would yours be?
So some of the challenges in my work were it taught me how to fail successfully, I guess, is how I would phrase it, because there's a lot of mistakes you're going to make in research. Good research, it doesn't always go the way that you want it to. In fact, it shouldn't. You should be discovering new things, contrary to whatever you think is going to happen. And so it taught me how to fail successfully, for sure. It also taught me time management skills. In a high stakes kind of high paced environment, when you're working on deadlines and I was working with people, so I was doing interviews, I was doing transcriptions, directly working with a local school district on an equity audit to improve their diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and it has a lot of consequence, it has real impact over people's lives, and so the stakes are pretty high. For me, it felt like the stakes were very high. So it taught me to pay attention to every decision that I was making, not only in research, but also just in how I was thinking about the work. And so I feel like it better prepared me professionally, but also academically for my future endeavors. So I'm glad I got started on that early.
Right. What is your research area? And did doing research help you understand the material in the classes better?
Yeah, so I would definitely say my research has shifted from my undergraduate studies. So now I look at creating applications for alternatives with Maine paper technology, which is very close to home to me because I'm from a small mill town in western Maine called Rumford. And so being able to see how those alternatives can be used and how my research could translate to the community that I'm from is really cool to me. And I also look at solutions that could potentially help with our clean water crisis that we are all suffering from.
Right. Now we talked about Cougar. Let's untangle that a bit. And those are also RLEs, research learning experiences. So maybe if somebody wants to take one of those, somebody wants to take the other. Just what is Cougar, first of all?
Okay, so Cougar, the Center for Undergraduate Research, that's our acronym, is an entity that exists here on campus with the sole mission of supporting undergraduate projects. Now, research is in our title, but I think it's really, really important to make sure that everybody is aware that what we support at Cougar is not just research. It is any sort of creative achievement that an undergraduate student wants to do in collaboration with a faculty mentor. And in fact, we've also started opening this up to graduate students. We now have a few opportunities for graduate students to also have projects under this umbrella. But basically, if you're a student and you have an idea, or you're associated with a faculty member and you've been working together on a project, you can get together and you can apply for funding to support you working on your project. We have two different opportunities. We have the academic year fellowship, which will give you, I believe, $2,000 to work from November through May on your research project, and you get to present your work at the research symposium, at the UMaine Student Symposium. We also have a summer fellowship, which will pay you $4,000 to be able to work from May 6th, right after graduation, all the way through the end of the summer. So these opportunities are open to anyone, any student on campus who, together with a faculty member, wants to put together an application. They are competitive, but that's a good thing, because you get an experience in writing a proposal, and it gets reviewed by faculty members from a range of different disciplines. And if it's one of the top ones, it will get funded and you can do your project.
Right. So for you, Amelia, to talk about RLEs, and then if a two-part question, the research symposium, what does it do to help students? You can do the research, but from your area, communications, you have to be able to communicate what you found. So maybe hit RLE first and then talk about that communications piece.
Yeah, so the Research Learning Experience is a program that the university they piloted it a few years ago, and it's expanding. I personally haven't participated yet, but I do have ideas. Like many of us, you start to think of things that you could do as proposals. But they are a pipeline for getting students into research early on in their program. So students are able to come in, I believe, as early as the couple weeks before their freshman year, and they're able to get plugged into a research process. They participate for a few weeks up through the semester, depending on the specific RLE, and they're able to get plugged in with a lab and get some hands-on experience with things like, for example, I have a psychophysiology lab where we're looking at media and we're doing things with eye tracking. So I could open up my lab and have people participate in a 2-week study and get hands-on experience that way.
And then the communication side,
Sure.
Teaching students to be able to talk about their work and why it matters.
And I think this is important across the board, and this is something that sometimes the natural sciences have a reputation for being harder to communicate, but even things within my field, media psychology or communication, media, and journalism, you really have to think about your audience, and you have to think about what it is that they'll take away from the research. And these symposiums are a great way to help curate that. And for my students, I have them practice. We start with a 5-minute pitch, and then they have to be able to do it in 3 minutes, and then they have to be able to do it in 30 seconds. And we talk about how to navigate a loud space and how much information to put on your poster and the role of the poster. And these are very important skills if you're going to participate in conferences and other research opportunities in sharing research. So I think it's a great way to find out what other folks are doing. I highly recommend that folks in the community drop in just to see the breadth of things that are projects that are going on. There's a lot of great energy, and students have worked really hard, so it's a chance for them to showcase all these wonderful things that they're finding. And
Right. I think I'm not sure if it was Mark Twain who said it, but I would have written you something shorter, but that is much harder and takes longer to do, right?
yeah, definitely.
For you as students, just talk about learning how to communicate what your findings were and what your research was all about and why it matters. Was that a challenge?
Yeah, I definitely think at the beginning of my research experience, it was a huge challenge because most of the time you are talking with people that fully understand your research and you don't have to simplify it. So we have to spend a lot of time in our lab group as a whole just learning on how to simplify our research to fully convey why it's important, because if you can't do that, then people aren't going to remember or care about your research.
Yeah. How about for you, Madeline?
Yeah, I struggle with the same thing because I thought through my mentorship process with my research mentor, it helped me learn how to pitch research to lay people who may want to care and want to understand, but it's just difficult if you haven't gone through every single step of the process. And I think that it gets very technical, so remembering who your audience is and their experience is key, and you want them to understand the relevancy of your work and what it is. And this was like my first time really giving a pitch, was at my first student symposium, and I was like talking fast, I was stumbling over my words, and halfway through I realized I had a very obvious mistake in my poster. So for this first sort of like baby bird experience, it let me get better and better at it from there too, and now I'd like to think that I'm much better at giving that sort of presentation. But I remember going home and like writing in my journal, if I could do that again, what would I do differently?
Right.
Because my research mentor was a little more hands-off, which I appreciated because I learned better that way through making those mistakes and through that experience. But it really helped me like trying to set myself up for success, because you can't really predict what mistakes you're going to make until you make them.
Does this stir memories for you guys when you were in the same position?
Oh my goodness, yes.
That moment of what would I do differently?
Yeah.
Right.
That mistake on the poster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Also,
rough.
your comment about failing successfully, and I think that's something that my lab still experiences it today. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect project. There's no such thing as a perfect presentation. And one of the cool things about something like the symposium is that you say something to one person, and maybe you didn't love how you said it, and then the next person walks up, and you have a new audience, and you get to try again. And
Take
you
two,
keep
right, yeah.
refining until you figure out what's really engaging folks and what they're connecting with.
Yeah, I think another way the symposium helped me personally was it made me more comfortable in academic spaces where I'm surrounded by people who know way more than me, or like just way smarter than me, who have like double my lifetime in the experience in the field that I'm trying to present about. So it's very humbling, but it also like makes sure that because I'm comfortable and confident, it allows me to meaningfully contribute to the research process. And I think that that's a really helpful way to utilize undergraduate students, not just as like tools themselves, but also set them up for success in the future.
Caitlin, we often hear the terms basic and applied research, and I know you're sort of involved in both ends of that, especially in the STEM fields. That's really important. Can you talk about the workflow, how one informs the other and morphs into the other and maybe becomes a company or a project or something tangible?
Absolutely, because we have all levels here at the university. So basic research is really the fundamentals. It's understanding the basics of the system and how it works, what happens in this situation, how does this change if this other thing changes. It's really what we all build off of. So basic research is really, really critical. Applied research is the next step. It's saying, okay, we now know these things from the basic research. How can we use this information? What tools can we develop that will allow us to achieve an outcome that we want to achieve? And this is then what can go on and become a company. We actually have a pretty strong entrepreneurial support network here. People who have projects that are interested in spinning out companies can do that with resources here at the University of Maine, with advising and things like that. Yeah. So
The Foster Center.
the Foster Center for
For-
Student Innovation is a
lot of student companies have come through there.
Yes, and there are even classes that you can take through the Foster Center that will help you understand what's involved in the entrepreneurial process.
Right.
So we really have the whole thing here at the university, from basics all the way through applied, and then launching into businesses, which, as Amelia said, can go out and then help the community, which is really what this is all about.
Yeah. I know in a previous podcast we talked about one of your projects, the catheter, so that's an example of what we're talking about here. Give us the cocktail napkin pitch. What is that project about?
So we have probably all heard that antibiotic resistance is a really big problem, that bacteria, the type that cause infections, are getting more and more resistant to the medicines that we use to treat them, and this is a problem. So in my lab, we look at nature for how nature solves the problem of handling bacteria. Usually nature doesn't use a lot of antibiotics. So we look at what nature does, and then we take those concepts and we apply them to human materials. The material we're particularly interested in is catheters. Those are devices that are used to drain urine, and they're very, very common and getting more common as our population ages. So in my lab, we have developed a bio-inspired solution that uses tricks from nature to stop bacteria from adhering to the surface of these medical devices. And we've got some great results that show that this really does work without antibiotics.
Wow. Amelia, a lot of people associate research with the hard sciences or medicine or people in lab coats with test tubes, that kind of thing, some of what you do, certainly. But can you talk about the social sciences and maybe the arts and the work happening there and how that contributes? I mean, if you're dealing with children who have anxiety problems because of the pandemic or whatever. There's so many other outside of the sciences sort of issues that the field that you sort of represent can work on.
Yeah, and even within my department, there's a lot of diversity with the different methods that folks are using to answer questions. So, for example, my lab, I mentioned earlier, I use things like eye tracking, so I'm interested in questions about how media use affects our emotions and our body image, or how we could strategically present information so that groups that are traditionally marginalized are able to benefit from that information. But so I do have a more typical lab in that I have undergraduate students and graduate students who come in and work with human subjects, and they're given a script and they have a protocol. They just engage with people more than test tubes. But then we have other folks in my department who are doing interviews or who are studying text, and they're going through and doing a really deep dive into the themes that emerge from important textual documents. And so it really, the role of the student and the scope of the project, the possibilities are endless. You can do a lot of different things.
So for anybody here, let me just talk a little bit about the unique role that UMaine plays in the state as the major research university. Let's some of those things we talked about at the beginning, improving quality of life, future workforce. I mean, does what you're doing make you think about staying in Maine and starting your life here? So just the role that UMaine plays in those key areas for any state to prosper. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really think we're spearheading research in Maine as a state, and I think that's not very controversial, but I think that makes us influential for a lot of reasons and in a lot of different ways. And I don't think people often consider the influence that this university has on the state's job market, the economy, the politics of the state. It's crazy. It's so important, and that's why it shocks me when people don't know all about the amazing research that not just undergraduate students, but just the whole faculty, the university as a whole turns out. I mean, the impact on the state, it's all about giving back. And I think that's a realization that I've had also, not just as a researcher, but as an organizer and a student and a leader. I've come to understand the value and the power of servant leadership and giving that back to your community from all that it's given you. And so I moved around a lot when I was little, but Maine is the place where I consider having grown up. And the gratitude I feel towards my community is reflected in the work that the university does and I do with the university. So yeah, it definitely makes me think about staying here.
How about for you, Liza?
Yeah, I definitely think that she's completely correct. And also just giving back and going to your communities to convey that is very important.
Is it a bridge too far to think that R&D or research at a university can make Maine or any place, the best place to live and work? I mean, that's a lofty goal, certainly.
I can see that happening for sure.
Yeah,
I think that definitely contributes towards it.
And future workforce, I mean, we're always talking about we need young people to move to Maine. Is this a way to make that happen?
Yeah, it can be, and I think getting back to the symposium and what it can do for the community, this can be a first step to help the students who are involved in these projects, whether they are hard science research or the soft science research or in arts and creative achievement, be able to better understand how to communicate what they're doing and listen to the community and be able to use that feedback to improve what it is that they're doing and how it is they're communicating it.
Yeah. How many students are involved with Cougar, roughly? Do you know?
Cougar.
Are we in the hundreds?
We're in the high hundreds.
Yeah, it's. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but it is a lot of students, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that Cougar is not the same thing as the symposium. Right? The UMaine Student Symposium. I think not a lot of people know this, but this is actually an event that is coordinated and put on by 3 different groups. It's Cougar, the Center for Undergraduate Research, which is sort of representing UMaine, but it's also the graduate student government. They're directly involved in helping, and also UMaine student government, the undergraduate student body. We 3 come together because this is an event that is really for students, and so it's critical to have that student input involved in it. So we get together, the three of us, and this whole thing it's a lot of work, it's a lot of planning, but it's absolutely worth it for when it comes together and you can see the community just coming together around this creativity.
And just want to get to the details about the symposium here in a second, but the thing that always is impressive is, I mean, there's more research in that one room than, maybe in the rest of the state combined. I mean, there's hundreds of projects that are displayed at the symposium. So when and where is it? Can the public go and check it out?
Absolutely. It's going to be Friday, April 12th. From 9 a.m. to, I believe, 2 p.m. It's going to be in the field house here at the UMaine campus, and it is open to the general public. We do encourage people to pre-register because that's going to make life a little bit easier when you come, but you can register on site, and we highly encourage everyone to come. Also, there are lots of ways to get involved in this. We really are in need of volunteers to help with setup and takedown and running the things, so if people are interested in that, they can find that information online on how to volunteer. Also, importantly, for grad students, community members, and faculty members, we have opportunities to judge, and we always need more judges, because a critical part of this is, of course, getting feedback from the community. So we arrange so that every poster and every talk that's going to be presented at the symposium is going to be judged by at least 3 people, and then there are monetary awards for the top scorers in a range of different categories.
We always like to sort of end with some version of this question, but if you sort of look out 5 or 10 years, what do you think we're going to see here at this institution in the state of Maine, or for you guys personally as students? Where are you going to be? Where will, the bigger questions, what might we see? Anybody who wants to jump in?
It's no small question.
Right.
I would say even in the 4 years since I've been at UMaine, I'm seeing growth in research opportunities and funding. I would hope to see more of that, at least within my department. We're seeing more undergraduate students who are learning about opportunities like research funding through Cougar and getting involved. So my hope is that that becomes even more normalized and that more folks are having these formative opportunities. So that would really, I think we're headed in a great direction, and the number of proposals that are funded, community support, and also just a note about the symposium, even folks that can just stop by for 15 minutes on their lunch break, you'll learn something. You don't have to be there from 9 to 2.
Right.
You can just drop by, and it's a great way to learn what's going on.
Liza, where do you think you'll be in 5 or 10 years? What will you be doing?
I hope I'm in a lab somewhere doing some research and development on a project that's cool to me and important.
Madeline?
Law school, policy research, something like that. Hopefully being part of the larger ripple that's coming from the University of Maine's research.
Caitlin will give you the last word.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see something happening in 5 to 10 years that I'm very excited about. So there's been a lot of noise about UMaine as an R1 research institution, but I think it's equally important to spotlight the arts and humanities that are here on campus as well. And my hope for the future is that we will be able to really bring these two things together even more than is already happening, that we can leverage the knowledge, the experience, and the unique perspectives in the arts and humanities and combine that with the research to really be able to achieve products that are synergistic between the two. I also would love to see coordination amongst the different campuses here on the state. So we have this here at UMaine, but there are also research symposia event going on the other campuses as well. And I think if we can be able to go to those and experience what's happening in those communities, as well as bring some of those folks from the other campuses here, that we can really cross-seed amongst our different entities and really begin to build more bridges and more strength here in what we can creatively do in this state.
All right. Exciting stuff. Thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. You can find all of our episodes in a number of places: Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud, and of course on umaine.edu. We've got a lot more great guests and topics to explore this semester, so make sure you watch for that. Questions or comments? Send them along to Maine Question at maine.edu. We'll catch you next time on the Maine Question.